All right, you ready to get started?
I'm ready whenever you. I'm trying to get centered here. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. I'm ready.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dad is back on the podcast. You were the first guest I had, but I realized that was 2 years ago, which is kind of weird because I forgot how long I've been doing this. But
Yeah.
I've been meaning to have you come back, and I was thinking, what would be a good topic for us to talk about? So I don't know if you suggested this or if I suggested this, but I wanted to go
It,
over.
it was definitely your suggestion because if you had asked me, I would have said, let's talk about my grandkids.
I mean, which would have been a conversation that you would have thoroughly enjoyed. I just don't know how
Yeah,
many.
absolutely. And on which I am an expert.
Yeah, right, right. um, well, yeah. So the topic we want to talk about is helping pastors, ministries that are wanting to fairly, honestly evaluate their staff compensation, and just kind
Mm,
of walk through a little bit of like a practical how-to on what you've learned in that process. And so why don't we start? Why don't you just give everybody an overview of your role at Faith,
sure.
different ministries, staff, and all that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm here at Faith Baptist in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I've been here for about 5.5 years. It's not a super large church. We would probably have maybe 800 on a Sunday morning, and then fewer than that, obviously, in some of the evenings. But there's a lot of moving parts here at Faith. So we've got the church as its own entity, and then we have a large Christian day school and a preschool program. So the preschool and day school together have, I think we're at 575 and have a long waiting list. So there's a lot of moving parts there, a lot of staff, teachers, support staff, hourly employees. We've got a large facility here. So we've got a number of people on the maintenance team. And then we also have a Bible college that's affiliated with our ministry. It's a separate 501c3, but there are those that are here in our ministry working in our offices that are also part of the college team.
Right, right. And the preschool and the day school have really taken off more recently. Um,
Yeah, I think that's been a consequence of, well, I think that we've got some really good leadership. Jonathan Rains is our administrator. He's amazing. So I think there's that. But I think also COVID has really upticked Christian education countrywide.
yes, yeah. I think across the board, basically every Christian school that I've know of and talked to, their enrollment is up to some degree the last couple of years. Um, So, right. So a lot of moving parts. And I thought, I mean, you'd be kind of uniquely qualified to talk to some of this because every ministry is a little bit different. Some is just a church, some have Christian school, but you've got a lot of different facets and therefore a lot of
Mm.
different staff. And even recently having had to hire more staff as school and preschool expands, need more folks. I wanted to kind of start though on culture because I
Mm.
feel like for any pastor, for any ministry leader that's thinking about compensation and staff and leading effectively, before you get into the numbers, I think it's really important to set, okay, what's a healthy culture? Because a healthy
Mm.
church culture is going to attract God-given talent. It's going to cultivate it, but we're all very well aware of toxic cultures, and that can happen in church and it can happen in the secular world, and people's talents get wasted and ultimately people are repelled from those types of places. So
Mm.
it's not really a secret. Over like the last 30 years you've been asked several different times, hey, would you consider leaving your ministry where you are right now and coming over and joining our ministry, and usually as the lead pastor. And
Right.
obviously, in almost every case, you're like, no, I don't think that's what God has for me right now. But you've been asked to consider
Right.
quite a few different ministries over the years. So
Right.
from an outsider, not your own ministry, but looking at other people's ministries, what are the aspects that attracted you and that were like, wow, that seems like a really healthy church culture? And what were some things that repelled you? Like, oh man, if I were to go there, these are some things that would really have to be addressed.
Right. Well, typically, if someone's asking you to come lead their ministry, then they perceive your ministry to be healthy, or they wouldn't be talking to you. So, um, it's kind of a catch-22, because they're talking to you because they perceive that you are a healthy leader who has presided over health in one's current ministry. And if someone's looking for a leader, typically what that means is the place to which you're going is struggling in some way. Certainly struggling from a lack of leadership, but in many other ways, sometimes because of that lack of leadership, they're struggling with any number of other issues and are broken in that way. So I think it's unfair for me to look at another ministry and say, well, what would attract me there? Because nothing. I mean, why would I want to leave where I am, where health is the norm, and go to an unhealthy place? So I think to talk to a leader about where he's going, what attracts me, really what would attract me is, how needed am I? What difference can the Lord use me to make in that ministry? What areas of brokenness exist that maybe my unique gift mix would help to solve? Yeah. So, I would go to a church for a very different reason than maybe somebody that's going to move across country, relocating because of a job. I think those people would say, I want to look for a church that's already healthy, a church that would already service the needs of my family. Yeah. But as a leader, I want to look for a church that I can help become healthy. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's a different mindset. I think throughout the Bible, God would call people from areas of health and success to areas of unhealth. And for instance, here's Philip in Samaria in a very healthy season of ministry. God calls him someplace else. Yeah. Or here's the Apostle Paul seeing great growth in Thessalonica, and through uncontrollable circumstances, God plants him someplace else. And humanly speaking, Paul would never have left Thessalonica without leaders in place and without, on such short notice. But, God's plans often are different than ours.
Yeah. That's a great point you make, that you don't want to view that. Like, I'm just thinking, you've got maybe a pastor, you got a ministry leader, they're in a current position and they feel unsatisfied. They feel like things are just, where things are at right now is just not where I want them to be. And maybe another ministry comes along and they're like, hey, would you consider joining us? And then they're like, oh, well, that place is so much better. And they're looking at it from what's best for me, yep, as opposed to where does God want to use me and help correct unhealthy culture and get it to a healthy place. Yeah.
I've made in all of my ministry transitions, and there have only been a few. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've always gone to a place where I have made less and had bigger problems. So, to me, an opportunity is, this is not the corporate world. We're not climbing the ladder. We're looking for greater opportunities to serve, and greater opportunities to serve often are masked in the costume of bigger problems and greater needs. So we have to orient ourselves to where is the greatest need. It's one of the reasons why the mission field is so white unto harvest and laborers are so few, is because we don't like to look at where the greatest need is. We like to look at where the greatest opportunity for me is. Yeah. So I think we need to have a radical change of thinking, even culturally, in the evangelical world.
Yeah, it takes me right to Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Like it's the job that nobody wants that's the most needed and has the fewest applicants. Yeah, that's really good. Okay, so being in a position of a lead pastor for so many years, you've at Faith for several years now, and then at Harvest for 20 years. You're primarily the one who's trying to build a healthy work culture for the church staff. What have you learned over these years?
Exactly that the most important part about any church is that it be healthy. And I think that's the model of Ephesians 4 is when a church is healthy, all the other things take care of themselves. And think about a human body. When your human body is healthy, then you're able to function in all the purposes of that body. I can work, I can exercise, I can be a husband, a dad, I can be effective because I'm not having to nurture my body. My body's healthy. I can use my body as the tool that it's intended to be. So when a church is healthy, all the things that we want church to be happen organically. And I think the problem that people have in church growth, and I don't even like that. I don't even like that that terminology. You know, I'm going to go to a church growth conference. You already have the wrong mindset. The mindset is, I want my church to grow, therefore I will do anything. I'll take steroids, I'll take whatever it makes to make my body grow. But many times, though, even that growth is unhealthy. Instead of, in what ways is my church unhealthy right now? My church is unhealthy in what ways? Deal with that. Healthy things will grow. Rick Warren said that famously years ago in The Purpose-Driven Life. And while I wouldn't agree with everything he said, what a great statement. Healthy things will grow. And churches grow for the same reasons restaurants grow. When people like the food and they're satisfied with the service, they invite their friends. And we've made too complex this whole idea of how do churches grow. Love God, love people, have a healthy place, and those healthy Christians can't help but grow and invite friends and bring people. That's the way Harvest Baptist Church grew for all those many years. That's the growth we've seen here at Faith. We've seen tremendous growth, but I think it's been through health. We're not the best church when it comes to formal outreach programs. We need to do better. We just talked about this in our staff meeting. We need to do better in these areas, but healthy things will grow. And so health to me is most important.
Yeah. I appreciate you speaking from personal testimony there about the steroids. I mean, you got way too big there at one point. It was really
absolutely. I was juicing it up, and when I hit the 300-pound mark, and it got embarrassing.
Yeah. I mean, look at you now. The before and after pictures are.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, thank you for noticing.
I think I like how you frame that. Healthy staff is about what you're focusing on as a ministry. If you're focusing on the right things. And you can see quickly how if the focus and the drive of a ministry is we've got to get our numbers up, we've got to get more people in the door, we've got to kind of hit these arbitrary benchmarks numerically, then it puts undue pressures and it gets people's focus off of the right things. So I think that's really good. What would you say?
And so as a senior leader, I'm sorry to cut you off. As a senior leader, then I think, and I'm probably speaking to some other senior leaders right now, and I would say, guys, then our responsibility is not to look at staff as tools by which the work gets done, but look at them as your primary ministry. I love them. I want to see them grow personally. I want to see their marriages be strong. I want their families to be all that they can be and should be for God. And so I think as we invest in our team in a friend way, in a leader way, in a mentor, in those organic ways, they can't help but grow. And then their growth will spill into their respective ministries. But when we begin to view staff as widgets, and replaceable parts that we bring in and out of our factory that we call the local church, it's a really mechanical way to look at ministry. And ultimately, that kind of ministry is going to grind us up and chew us up and spit us out.
Yeah. I've always felt like a lot of pastors secretly wish that they were CEOs, and that comes out a little bit in their leadership style. And I know for me personally, that would probably be a struggle if I was in that position, because I'm a numbers person. So I want to get the Excel spreadsheet out, and I want to look at. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with understanding some of the numbers and financials of your ministry. It's important for you to be informed on those things, but those are not the best indicators of true spiritual health. Can we just park there for a second though? Like, as a lead pastor, what are the things that you look at as the best indicators, if we can have any, of the spiritual health of the church?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question on several occasions, and what your measuring stick is tells me what your priorities are. So if your measuring stick involves all the rubrics of, attendance and offering and people in the door and just all of that, that doesn't tell the whole story. Now, does that mean that numbers don't matter? No, I'm not saying numbers don't matter, and they can indicate things, but much more important are, what is the Bible rubric for health? I think number one, the Bible rubric is that we may grow up unto him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. So I think a question we should ask ourselves is, in what ways does our church reflect Christ-likeness? Which begs the deeper question. So then what is Christ-likeness? And Christ-likeness is, here's a passion for God and for others. And I know that sounds simple, but I think that's a really good starting place. Does our church have a passion for God and others? How does the church organically care for itself? Now, I'm not talking about the programs you've put in place and care groups you have and your adult Bible fellowships and the activities you've planned. Yeah, that tells me a little bit about your organizational prowess to recognize some needs. But I'm talking about the organic health of your church. When somebody is hurting, are people rallying around that hurting person? When somebody is succeeding, are people rallying around them and celebrating with them? Are they doing that life together? Those to me are much better indicators of health. Is there an organic serving of one another? I think we have made a big deal in recent years about having a good guest experience. And listen, I think we ought to have a great guest experience. A visitor ought to walk through the door, sense love, be greeted, know where the classrooms are, not feel uncomfortable. I think that's important. But if we're not careful, our churches will become little more than Walmart greeting institutions, where we make visitors feel really, really good about their experience, and we're really good about the customer user-friendly experience. But after 2 or 3 weeks, they realize, oh, I'm an employee. I don't get greeted at the door. Oh, I'm an employee. I stock shelves, and I'm going to have to wait another year for my 50-cent raise. What we need to do is we need to invest in the way that we love each other. Because if I'm visiting a church, I'm a little bit savvy about churches now. So when I visit a church, I'm really not concerned so much about how you treat me. I'm looking at how you treat each other, because that's going to be me. Mm-hmm. So back to your original question, how do you assess growth? Or health? I think you assess growth and health through some of these spiritual lenses, like loving God, loving others. I think our program ought to reflect that. I think looking at the dispositions of the fruit of the Spirit, like love, joy, peace, long-suffering, and so on, looking at dispositionally, is this church a healthy place where there's evident joy and peace, where the fruit of the Spirit is evident in the lives of the people? The messy part about that is it doesn't have the hard edges that sometimes an organizational leader wants. It doesn't have the hard edges necessarily that, some of us that have come out of a more legalistic background, there's safety and sometimes even security in having those edges. So it's a little bit messier, but it's a whole lot more accurate.
Yes. I think that's very well stated. This is certainly not a catch-all, but one of the things that I've always liked as sort of a little bit of a glimpse into the health of a group or a church is, do people hang around and talk to each other afterwards? Mm-hmm. Like that tells you if there's a familial sense to this this group, or are we just attending something? Are we just showing up and then back to our agenda?
Mm.
Well, that's great. So I wanted to start kind of talking about culture first and foremost, because I think that's so foundational, but let's get a little bit practical
Mhm.
on the how-tos. Because I'm sure people are curious to hear a little bit more about the kind of the steps that you've taken. So you
Yeah.
recently went through a process there at Faith where you wanted to reevaluate staff compensation, have a little bit more of a policy-driven approach. I know there's probably many churches that it's just like, we don't really think about it until we have to, and then we're just kind of trying to pull numbers out of thin air to figure out what's fair, what's not, what benefits to offer. And there's really no organization or process to it. And with a
Mhm.
ministry that size and that many staff, you really do have to have those things in place. So,
Mhm.
uh, first of all, what resources have you used to figure out compensation, how to make it fair, and what it should look like?
Yeah, I mean, in a just in a general way, because I know a number of fellow pastors and can speak freely with them, I think my first resource is always, hey, and I'll call the name of a pastor or get on the phone or send that email. So I feel like I've got some really healthy friends and ministries, to which I can refer. So there's that first. But on a much more practical level, probably the resource that has helped me the most is the website churchsalary.com. And I think it's a subsidiary of Christianity Today. I think maybe some of you might be familiar with what was called the Clergy Compensation Guide that was put out. I don't know if it was every year, but it was almost every year, I think. And from what I understand, Christianity Today purchased the research for that, and churchsalary.com today kind of represents that robust research-based analysis of clergy salary. And when I say clergy, it refers to so much more than that. Really, it would be ministry leader.
Mhm.
So it could be somebody that would be a bookkeeper at the church or a maintenance facility director. And what's wonderful about churchsalary.com, I think it's like a $99 a year subscription, but it is so worth it. I mean, every church ought to do this. And matter of fact, churchsalary.com ought to give me some kickback for this.
Yeah, this podcast brought to you by churchsalary.com.
Yeah, and what it's very easy to navigate. So you get on there and you create a report, and the report asks you for a lot of demographic information that will help hone the report to your particular area. So you put in your zip code, you put in the position that you're researching, you put in the essentially how qualified is that person for that position? What level of education have they attained? How many years of experience do they have? And it's really easy. So once you go through all of those questions, which will literally take you 10 minutes, once you go through all that, it will spit out a report based upon thousands. Like I think it's like 15,000 churches. And so you're going to get a median income. You're going to see the first and the third quartile. You're going to see a number of other factors that factor into that salary. For instance, you're going to see, what percentage of people in this position also receive healthcare benefit. What percentage of people in this position also receive retirement benefit, or a car allowance, and there's any number of different things. So it takes all of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And because, honestly, pastors struggle, guys that I know, with broaching this topic with their board, especially a pastor that, as pastors, many times we are the curators of the budget. And I don't know how wise that is, but it is in a lot of situations, the situation. And so it seems a little bit disingenuous or self-serving when a pastor has to go to a deacon board and say, hey, listen, I really feel like I'm underpaid, because then you're dealing with, okay, does that mean I'm ungrateful? Am I unwilling to work? I can get a side job. And I'm that way. Like, I don't ever want to talk about myself. I don't want to talk about how much I'm compensated. And so actually in a larger ministry, it's easier, because what a pastor in a larger ministry can do, who has a large staff, we've got like 80 people on staff. So what I can do then is I can go to our guys, and say, guys, listen, I have a heart that our people in our ministry are making a livable wage at industry standard. That's what I want. I want our people to make a livable wage at industry standard. Hey guys, would you take a deep dive? Would you look at this website? And this is exactly what I did. I went to a man in our church who is eminently qualified, CPA, doctorate level, and some other really, really sharp men in our church. And I said, hey, listen, would you take this information and superimpose it on our staff and our school? And can you just make sure that all of our people are at industry standard? And that got the ball rolling. And what I wasn't expecting is that they also did that for me. Now, that wasn't my goal in doing it. I wasn't rubbing my hands together and saying, this is my way in. But that's what happened. And really what ended up happening is everybody in our ministry received a healthy adjustment to salary, to compensation, based upon just that one exercise alone.
Yeah, that's really good. So on churchsalary.com, you're the one who told me about it originally, because I was looking for some resources. Doing what I do, I'm regularly having those conversations, and over the last year, I've had at least a dozen where pastors are like, "Hey, I'm trying to figure this out. I don't know what fair compensation is. I want to use something that's actually like solid information and not just what I think." And so I went ahead and I got the churchsalary.com subscription, the $9 a year, and I've done a bunch of reports for all types of folks. So if you're listening to this and you're like, that sounds great, but I don't know if I want to pay $99 for my one report or my 2 or 3 reports, contact me. I'll be happy to do those for you. It does not take me very long at all. But you're right. The reports itself are very thorough. Lots of really helpful. I mean, like, you will be very impressed with just how much information is contained in that report. I mean, as far as I know, it's the best resource out there for church compensation for all those different levels. Another one that could be helpful, kind of a secondary one, is Lifeway, Southern Baptist Research Organization. They did a 2018 study. Their 2021 they didn't do because of COVID. So it's a little bit outdated. So you kind of have to inflation adjust those numbers, but it's free. It's a little bit more clunky, but once you figure it out, you can search by state, by position. They don't have nearly as many people in that study, though. So to me, Church Salary is definitely the best resource. That could be another secondary resource. Maybe others that you're aware of. I feel free, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh, I've got another one, let me know, because I would love to know what other resources are out there. But how were those changes received by the staff?
Yeah. So let me take one step back before I answer that question.
Yes.
So you're out there, you're hearing this and saying, I need a bump in my salary. I feel like I'm below industry standard. My staff does. But before you navigate the conversation with your board or with other decision makers, I think it's important that you plow the spiritual ground with your leaders and with your church family. So they need to understand, before you even introduce this, what is the biblical underpinnings for caring for people, for prioritizing staff, for remuneration, and teach on that. Don't be afraid to teach on that. When I came to faith, and a great ministry, they were struggling very much financially, almost a $7 million debt. They were struggling to even pay their mortgage. The buildings were really, really struggling, and a lot of the money they were saving, and I think with the very best of motives, but I think that a lot of the money they were saving by paying staff what I believe were below poverty wages. Just so when I came and was able to assess the situation for a couple months, I sat down with our guys. I said, guys, listen, where God is the one that provides money for a ministry. The wealth comes from the Lord. And our job is not to create wealth. Our job is to manage what God has given us in a responsible way. And the way we're spending our money as a ministry is going to reflect our values. And right now, if you were to look at only our budget, look at only our expense report, what you would see is a ministry that does not value people. And I said, I know that that's not honoring to the Lord. So guys, I'm going to recommend, this was back when we had no money. I said, guys, I'm going to recommend that we give every one of our school staff immediately a 10% raise, 10%. And then we're going to make something that we put in a bonus structure. As you know, we put in a matching program for retirement. We did all of this like right away while we had no money. And I said, guys, there is that scatters and yet increases. And the biblical principle is let's do what's right. Let's disperse this money in a responsible, God-honoring way. And let's just see what God does. And I said, now, if we can't make budget, then take it out of my salary. Just take it out of my salary. I don't care. Just take it out of my salary. I have the ability to generate income outside of church if I want to. So I'll just do that. Well, we never had to do that. Mm-hmm. What we found is we did right. We honored God. We took care of people, and the floodgates began to open. Now, I'm not trying to preach a health, wealth, and prosperity thing here, but what I am saying is pastors lead spiritually first. And when you do that, you're going to see God come alongside. We do that all the time with our own people. Someone will come to you and say they're struggling financially. And one of the questions we'll ask them, and it seems a bit self-serving, is we'll say, well, are you honoring the Lord with your giving? And no, I can't afford that. And what do we tell them? We say, well, no, put God first, and God's going to help you in every other area financially. And I believe that. I've seen that true in our own life. And so if that's true individually, then that's also true corporately. Put your people first, put your workers first. Jesus did that. Jesus, we find escaping sometimes from the crowd so that he has more time to invest in the relational training of his 12. Why? Because Jesus understood the principle of multiplication, sometimes that we don't understand. People aren't tools. They're ministry partners who need to be cared for in every way, including financially.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in the people business. People before programs, before facilities. That's good.
See, I love how I say something for like 5 minutes and then you come back and make one statement. It's like, yeah, I probably should have said that way.
Yeah, I think between the two of us, I think our listeners will know who's been more helpful on the explanation side so far.
Yeah, whatever.
Podcast. There's a reason why you're the guest. Well, so and then back to the staff. How did staff receive that? Those conversations of, hey, here's what we're going to do, and here's why, and all that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, who doesn't receive a raise well? I mean, so yeah, from the standpoint of gratitude and attitude, all of that is just going to be a natural outflow of caring for people. But let me tell you the other part of it, and that is the spouses of staff members. And to me, that really speaks to the health of a family, because my most important ministry is Wanda, is mom, but when I'm mistreated, it's okay. When I'm lied about, okay. When I'm undercompensated, okay. But who really is bearing that? The person that's really bearing that is the spouse, the family, the extended family. And they look at it and they begin to form a negative opinion about you as a leader, about your ministry, because of the way you're treating their family. So, wow, if you can bless a family, you can build a church.
Yeah, it's really sad sometimes to be kind of privy to those conversations with people where they're in a position where they know they're not being compensated the way that they should be in their ministry. And they have the attitude of like, it's not really about me. Like, I'm okay. Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes, but they're feeling the weight from both sides because their spouse is struggling and they're discouraged, and their kids are they're victims of the lack of resources and being able to take vacation with the family and have the kids involved in music or in sports or in these types of things. And so it's like, personally, I'm okay, but I don't want my family to suffer the consequences of somebody else not.
Yes.
Um,
Typically, in some of the circles that I've been associated with, there's this huge disparity of, well, okay, the pastor is like taken care of so well, and this is not every ministry,
right?
But then staff, they're kind of undercompensated, and I'll tell you, over time, that will really erode the confidence and even the fellowship that a staff can have with the senior leader. One of the things that I did, and it was a small thing, and I didn't do it as a sign. I just did it because it made sense. When we came to here to Faith, is the pastor's office was this huge office, and there's nothing wrong with that. Had a big living room and a bathroom and a kind of a library area, and some of our staff, and we were a growing staff as we hired some new people in those first couple of years and in the last couple of years as well, but they didn't have space. So we just redid our whole office wing, and everybody got the same size office. So like, I'm right here in my office right now, and like, I'll just show you my office. There it is. Okay, that's my office. And everybody has an office about that size. I'm not against the pastor he needs more privacy or whatever, but for our ministry, it worked. And I wasn't anticipating this, but it really built an esprit de corps among our staff to say, hey, our pastor is not expecting of us what he doesn't expect of himself, and vice versa.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, if you want to see my dad's office, it'll be on Facebook or on YouTube if you're listening to the podcast. You're like, oh, I want to see what this office looks like.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, some of you are just listening to the audio. My bad.
Last thing I want to hit on is, sometimes as far as job descriptions, I think this is a really important part of staff compensation and making sure that you're just the church culture, all of that. It's good sometimes to take that survey of what your church staff does, their areas of responsibility, and maybe sometimes shut down responsibilities, maybe bring on new staff, offload some responsibilities from other staff. So you've gone through this process there at Faith, and really still it's continuing to evolve. What advice would you give? What have you learned in having to do that several times with staff and really specifying job descriptions?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm probably a weak person to ask that question to, because I'm not an organizational leader. I'm more of a relational leader. So I'm not really good in the minutia, and I'm certainly not good at the detailed structure of a job description. But what I feel like I am good at is seeing big picture items and big picture responsibilities for our staff. So our situation is a little bit different. I've got some guys on our team that do a much better job than I do on that. Matter of fact, we're even have another hire coming here in a month. I can't announce it yet, but another key member of our pastoral team that I think will round us out in some really, really good ways. I read something years ago that, and it's always stuck with me, and that is that growing ministries should hire ahead of growth, and ministries that are more of a plodding kind of ministry that do grow, but predictably and slowly, should hire because of growth. And that's really good advice. So our ministry is a growing ministry, and we're seeing great things happen. Tons of visitors, people are being added. I think we added 119 new members last year, that actually went through our process and joined and either had been baptized somewhere else and joined our church, or saved and baptized here. The point is this, as ministry has grown, we've had to shuffle the deck a bit. So because I inherited staff, all of whom were great people, but some of whom were in the wrong seat on the bus, some of whom had too many responsibilities, some did not have enough. So I had to kind of figure out what people's gift mix was. I had to figure out what their capacities were. And that takes time. You got to work with people. You got to let people fail. You've got to let people, you got just have to learn it. And that takes time and patience. So we did that. And then once we did that, my philosophy, I guess, would be that people generally think in threes. And so on our staff, you could talk to any one of our guys. They have basically 3 items. What are the 3 things? And I want them to do the things that they do best. Now, in an ideal world, all 3 of those things would be things they do best. But in the practical world, usually it means, hey, here are 2 things I really like to do, and here's 1 thing that I do that somebody has to do, and so I'm going to do it. So for me, as the senior leader, my 3 areas are, I do the majority of teaching and preaching. I am the curator of God's vision for Faith Baptist Church. Somebody has to be the person that, does that vision thinking and praying and researching. So I'm the curator of God's vision for our church. I do the majority of preaching and teaching, and then I invest in our leadership team, because I want Faith Baptist Church to be a place where the leaders that on the ground level of our church are all lay leaders. And our job as a pastoral team is we're the coaching staff. So we don't need to be on the court. We don't need to be shooting the game-winning shot. We want to help coach our church to be successful. So I want to be the head coach. That's what I want to do. And I want my offensive coordinator to do his thing, my defensive coordinator. And the really good head coaches in the NFL are coaches that have learned to give those big rocks to other people. So that's what I want to be. I want to be that relation. Have you ever seen and I know, you're way more into sports than I am, but you see these huddles, these timeouts, big championship game. And the head coach is saying things like, okay, guys, we need to get out there, get the job done. We need to get up and down the court. We need to, and you're thinking, anybody could say this, but that's his role now. All the other technical things, this assistant coach has taken this player aside. He's drawn up this play. The head coach really has become the coach of the coaches. So that's kind of my role. Then every other guy on our team, he could say, I have 3 roles. So if it's Josh Venable, he does care. If you're in a hospital, if you're a shut-in, you can expect that he's going to be the point man on that. Not the only person, because he's training others, but he's the point man. He's the point man on counseling. He's the point man for our singles ministry. So those are his 3 rocks. So the way I like to manage our team, and I don't even like the word manage, but to help coach our team, is to think through their 3 big rocks. Then I say things to them like this: don't let me have a bigger vision for your area than you do. This is one of your big rocks. Go for it. I want to give people a lot of rope. Matter of fact, I'll tell our guys, if I start putting you on the clock, so to speak, if I start saying things like, hey, listen, you need to be here at such and such time, that's like another pastor screaming at you. Okay, because I'm not going to lead that way. I'm not going to be this bully pulpit leader. I'm going to give you all kinds of rope and latitude. But with that freedom comes great responsibility. Have a great vision, see it. I'm an FYI pastor. I don't need to come up with the idea. I don't need to know every step in the process, but I want you to keep me posted as you go. I want to be aware. I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to be caught by surprise. So a couple of ways we do that is we just have a great relationship. You can ask anybody on our team separately. We're good friends. We're good friends. We love each other. And then number two, we have a pretty robust meeting every Wednesday, staff meeting, and we talk through things. And we're not afraid to speak into each other's lives. Patrick Lencioni said in his great book, The Advantage, that the key to corporate health, and this would certainly apply to a church, to ministry health, is peer-to-peer conflict. So getting to the place where we trust each other, we love each other, and we're willing to look each other in the eye and hold each other accountable for our failures and celebrate together without personal ego our successes.
Yeah, really great. One last question before we wrap up. How often do you look at adjusting pay? Is that yearly? And if so, like what is it, single, or like the same percentage increase each year, cost of living? How do you look at that?
Yeah. Well, we look at it for sure every year. So that's minimum. We do look at it every year. This year we looked at it because of inflation, because of the economy. We looked at it ahead of year's end, and we were able to give some bonuses to our school staff just because we felt like we wanted to make a one-time adjustment. And we gave them a healthy raise again. Next, we've given them raises every year. We gave at least a cost of living adjustment every year, and we set that at 4%. Now this year, 4% didn't cover a cost of living adjustment. So what we did is we gave a bonus on top of that. So certainly we look at it every year. And then as a team, like as a leadership team, we'll talk through, hey, who are some people that are really doing a stellar job? Maybe some people that would be a consideration for a merit raise. And so we do that every year as well.
Yeah, that's something I think for sake of time, I'm going to wrap it up there, but that would be something else I'm sure people would be interested to hear about is kind of how do you look at that? How do you evaluate merit and that sort of thing? I know this has been really helpful for a lot of folks listening. I know most people listening, they're already familiar with you, Everyday Truth, but if somebody wants to get connected with you or has questions more about these types of things, staff and compensation and all of that, what would be the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, I would say I try to help people in 3 ways, maybe 4 ways outside of our ministry here at Faith. Number one, I have a podcast called Everyday Truth. We go through a portion of the Bible, just verse by verse, 15 minutes a day. Love to have you join me. We'll put it maybe down in the show notes. Number 2, I own a company called Land of the Bible Tours, and we go to Israel. I would love to have you join me on an Israel trip. We also do Journeys of Paul, landofthebible.org. Love to have you be a part. Number 3, our Bible college, Veritas Baptist College, VBC, has an arm called Truth Matters Institute. It's totally free. And the content in many of our more popular classes, we offer for free. So if you just have a desire to deepen your knowledge of God's word or study a particular topic, just go to vbc.edu. Truth Matters. It's all free. And we want to make that a good resource for you. And then lastly, I do speak out pretty much every week for a day or two somewhere around the country or around the world. If I could ever be a blessing to your staff or to your church, my schedule is kind of pretty packed, but if we schedule far enough in advance, I'd love to come. I'd love to see your ministry. If I could speak into your staff culture, I'd love to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dad. Thanks for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.